At 2:30 a.m., the quiet night outside St. Petersburg was broken by a sudden roar in the sky. Ukrainian attack drones came in fast and low, their engines buzzing like angry swarms. Within seconds, the first explosions ripped through Russia's $2.9 billion oil refinery, a site that had supplied fuel not only to the city but also to military convoys heading toward the front. Fireballs shot into the air as drones slammed into storage tanks, tearing metal apart and igniting thousands of gallons of fuel. Towers of flames reached high above the complex, and thick black smoke rolled out for miles, covering nearby towns in a blanket of darkness. People woke from their sleep to the sound of blasts, and videos soon began to circulate online, showing the night sky glowing red as if the horizon itself was on fire. This was no accident, no minor strike. This was a direct hit against one of Russia's most valuable energy hubs. The attack was not random. For weeks, Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking fuel convoys feeding this refinery. Drones and satellites had followed delivery routes, mapped weak points, and marked chokeholds. Analysts warned that this refinery was a key artery, pumping fuel toward Russia's war machine. The site was defended by radar systems, anti-air missile batteries, and fighter jets stationed nearby. But these defenses had cracks. Ukrainian planners studied every angle, every blind spot, and waited for the right moment. That moment came on this night, when radar coverage was thin and shift changes slowed the Russian response. A swarm of drones was launched, some carrying explosives, others programmed to confuse and overwhelm defenses. By the time alarms sounded, the attack was already underway. Russian crews scrambled in panic. Spotlights lit the sky, missiles streaked upward, and fighters roared into the night, but there were too many targets. Some drones were intercepted and fell in burning pieces to the ground, but others slipped through the gaps. When they hit hard. One drone slammed directly into a distillation tower, splitting it open and igniting a massive fire. Another drove into a tank farm, setting off a chain of secondary explosions that turned the entire section of the yard into a firestorm. Pipes ruptured, pouring burning fuel across the ground. Workers fled as buildings collapsed under the pressure of shockwaves. What began as a precision strike quickly spiraled into a full-scale inferno. The attack showed how vulnerable even Russia's most guarded sites were. Despite years of building air defenses, the swarm had broken through. For civilians nearby, it felt like war had come to their doorstep. The refinery, once a symbol of industrial power, was now an inferno of twisted steel and blazing fuel. And this was only the beginning. The blasts didn't stop with the first strike. After the initial drones smashed into the refinery, more followed, weaving past tracer fire and missile launches. Russian defenses were active, but they were too slow, too scattered. Surface-to-air batteries fired volley after volley, and fighter jets scrambled overhead, but the night sky turned into chaos. Electronic jamming signals from the swarm confused radars, creating ghost echoes on screens and making defenders waste precious minutes. While crews tried to sort real threats from false ones, more drones broke through and slammed into high-value targets inside the complex. Each impact set off another fireball. A drone struck directly into the main distillation tower, the heart of the refinery. Metal warped and collapsed as fire consumed it, and the pressure from ruptured pipes triggered a shockwave that shook the ground for miles. Another drone dived into a storage yard filled with tanker trucks. The explosion there was so powerful that it shattered windows in nearby villages, and flames engulfed dozens of vehicles at once. It was no longer a strike. It was a chain reaction tearing the refinery apart piece by piece. On the ground, Russian defenders scrambled to make sense of what was happening. Some soldiers fired small arms into the sky, desperate to hit something, while others ran hoses to try and stop the spread of flames. But the scale was too large. Every corner of the refinery seemed to be burning. Pipelines ruptured and spilled rivers of flaming fuel. Storage tanks burst under the pressure of heat, sending mushroom clouds of fire into the night. Crews inside the refinery were trapped between collapsing structures and spreading fires. Radio channels were filled with frantic voices calling for help, asking for reinforcements, and reporting more drones overhead. Local air defenses were stretched thin. With so many fires already burning, visibility dropped and radar coverage was patchy. By the time Russian command realized how bad the damage was, the site was already a disaster zone. Then came the collateral damage. The railway sidings that carried fuel away from the plant were hit by flying debris and firestorms, setting off more explosions in parked tanker cars. Thick smoke blanketed the area, making it impossible for fire crews to get close. Power lines that fed nearby towns snapped and sparked, plunging whole districts into darkness. Ash rained down across villages, coating roofs and fields in black soot. Families were ordered to evacuate as sirens wailed, and buses rolled in to move people away from the spreading danger. Schools and hospitals nearby scrambled to clear out patients and children, fearing the fires might spread beyond the refinery gates. By dawn, the surrounding countryside looked like a war zone, lit by orange flames that refused to die down. The strike was more than just a precision hit. It was a message carved into fire and steel. Ukraine had shown it could not only reach deep into Russian territory, but also cripple a key part of its energy supply. And with every passing hour, the cost of the strike grew higher. The refinery wasn't just another industrial site. It was one of the biggest suppliers of refined fuel in the northwest of Russia, feeding both civilian markets and military logistics. The moment it went offline, the effects rippled instantly across the region. Train schedules moving fuel toward air bases in western Russia were disrupted. Convoys that normally rolled daily had to be rerouted hundreds of kilometers to smaller facilities already stretched to their limits. Military commanders reported immediate strain on jet fuel reserves. Tank units preparing for rotations faced delays as deliveries slowed to a trickle. What seemed like one night of fire at an oil plant quickly translated into a direct blow on Russia's military readiness. Ukraine's choice of target was no coincidence. By striking this refinery, it hit both the economy and the war effort at the same time. But the fallout wasn't only logistical. It was economic and political. Markets reacted almost instantly once reports of the fire spread. Moscow tried to downplay the incident, labeling it a technical malfunction, but satellite imagery and local footage told a different story. Videos showed giant flames lighting up the night sky, and images of scorched storage tanks appeared across social media. Western analysts quickly confirmed what Moscow tried to deny. The strike had caused billions in damages, with repair costs likely stretching for months. Insurance premiums on energy infrastructure spiked, and questions were raised about how safe Russia's core facilities really were under constant drone threat. The image of a secure and untouchable Russia was crumbling, replaced by scenes of vulnerability. Inside Russia, the political blowback was sharp. Local officials faced anger from residents forced to evacuate, while national media struggled to maintain the government's narrative. Commentators loyal to the Kremlin blamed Western support for Ukraine, while independent voices quietly noted the embarrassing truth. Russia's advanced air defenses, the same ones it boasted about for years, had failed to stop a relatively cheap swarm of drones. That embarrassment mattered. Confidence in Moscow's ability to protect its own strategic sites took a serious hit. The question spread quickly across Russian social platforms. If drones can reach St. Petersburg, what else is at risk? Western capitals, on the other hand, framed the attack as proof of Ukraine's growing capability and innovation. Analysts pointed out that while Russia invests billions in fighter jets and missile systems, Ukraine was using low-cost drones to punch holes in those defenses. And each hole widened the pressure on Russia's economy. Every day the refinery stayed offline meant more fuel shortages, more expensive rerouting, and a heavier strain on the war machine. It wasn't just a battle of weapons, it was a battle of patience, supply chains, and resilience. By the end of the week, Moscow faced a reality it could not easily spin away. Billions in losses, a crippled refinery, angry citizens, a nervous military, and a reminder that no city, not even St. Petersburg, was truly safe from Ukrainian reach. When the fires finally began to die down, the damage was undeniable. Satellite images taken in the days after the strike showed blackened ground, collapsed storage tanks, and entire sections of the refinery reduced to twisted steel. Pipelines leading into the facility were charred and broken. Rail sidings that once loaded tanker cars were scorched beyond use. The refinery's heart, its distillation towers and processing units, had been gutted. Experts who studied the images said it would take not days or weeks, but months to repair, if repair was even possible. In the meantime, fuel shipments that once flowed easily out of St. Petersburg had to be rerouted along longer and riskier paths. Convoys that once drove 100 kilometers now had to travel double or triple that distance, burning more fuel to deliver less. The irony was clear. Russia had lost fuel not only in the fire, but also in the costly detours it was forced to make afterward. On the ground, local communities felt the impact too. Entire towns were blanketed in ash, and air quality warnings were issued for days. Residents were told to stay indoors, while emergency crews worked non-stop to cool what remained of the refinery. Roads around the site were sealed off, and hundreds of workers were left without jobs as operations ground to a halt. For the Russian government, it was not just a battlefield loss, but also a civilian crisis that drew more attention to the vulnerability of its infrastructure. Each day the refinery remained offline was another day of frustration, fear, and financial loss. Politically, the strike sent a clear signal that Ukraine could reach deep inside Russian territory, far beyond the front lines. St. Petersburg is not some distant border town. It is one of Russia's largest cities, a hub of commerce and history, a place Moscow considers untouchable. Yet Ukrainian drones had turned it into a battlefield. For Russia's leadership, this was humiliation. For Ukraine, it was proof that no distance could shield the Kremlin from retaliation. Western analysts compared the attack to economic warfare. Low-cost drones had managed to inflict billions in damage, a scale of destruction disproportionate to the weapons used. This imbalance highlighted one of Ukraine's greatest strengths, turning small tools into big results. The larger message was simple but powerful. Concentrate your fuel, and you risk losing it all. Russia had relied on massive centralized refineries to keep its war machine running, confident that size and defenses would protect them. But Ukraine showed that size also meant vulnerability. A single strike could cripple output, disrupt supply chains, and rattle markets. For the Russian military, it meant fewer flights, slower vehicle resupply, and growing pressure on logistics. For the Russian people, it meant shortages, price spikes, and the realization that even major cities were not safe. And for the rest of the world, the lesson was clear. The battlefield is no longer confined to trenches and front lines. It now stretches into cities, energy hubs, and economic arteries. With cheap drones, Ukraine proved it could hit the very lifeline of Russia's power. The $2.9 billion refinery fire was more than just an explosion. It was a warning shot, a message written in smoke and flames that in this war, no target is beyond reach.